She croaked.
They'll definitely call Mom.
Don't tell Mom. The Babysitter's dead.
Rock and roll!
Now, Christina Applegate spends the summer
Don't forget to do the dishes, okay?
with no nagging, no curfews, no rules.
Dishes are done, man.
Don't tell Mom the Babysitter's dead. Rated PG-13. Starts Friday, June 7th at a theater near you.
Hey, folks, we're here. Yes, I still look like this. Thanks to friend of the show at YumiMuse or at monster.muse on Instagram. I am Jeff Galashaw at Unfinished B2. And with me, as always, is Andre Joseph of AJ Epics Productions.
I'm right on top of that, Rose.
And this week, we are doing a deep dive. And this week, we are taking a look at 1991's Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. Yes, that Christina Applegate extravaganza. This episode is brought to you by Andre. This was your pick. And Andre, tell us your history with Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead and why you picked this film for this week.
So, Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter, 1991. I didn't see this movie when it was in the theaters like a lot of people. I saw it when it was on HBO, when it first premiered. And I don't know if I loved it the first time I saw it, but I remember watching it all the way through. And then it became one of those movies that it would be on every summer and I would find myself glued to it. Like, no matter what, it was always on TV. And whether I had nothing to do and it was on, or if I was bored and I had on the background, I would play this movie. And I still don't know to this day why I really, really like this movie, but maybe it's because the stuff that maybe I start to relate to as I got older, when I got to my teens, when I got to my 20s, and it just continues to stand out even to this day where I watch it and I'm like finding myself glued to it. So this movie was, it wasn't Christina Applegate's first film, but it was definitely the first big thing she did coming off of Married with Children, which was still on the air at that time. And that's what I obviously had known her from. And everybody in America had a crush on Christina Applegate as Kelly Bundy. So here she is playing a much more smarter teenager in Sue Ellen Crandall, who, you know, is kind of like the average old American teenager with a big family, a mom, and, you know, her siblings, and her mom is about to go away to Australia for the summer, and she's expecting, like everybody else, you're going to enjoy yourself. Like, I think she was just literally getting out of high school, and they're surprised when they find out that they're going to be left behind with a babysitter for the summer. And the babysitter is a mean old bitch who is basically treating all these kids like crap and keeping them at home and making their lives a living hell. And this is only the first 10 minutes of the film. So when they finally decide they're going to take a stand on this babysitter, they find her dead. Now, they insinuate that when the babysitter went into her brother's room, Kenny, who's like a big rock goth type of guy, that it freaked her out and probably gave her a heart attack or a stroke. And so rather than call the police, they decide to dump the body in a cemetery and take her car, take whatever money she had left behind. And now they got to figure out what to do, because now they've got to fend for themselves. So first, she decides she's going to get a job, and she gets a job at basically at a fast food joint where she befriends and starts a relationship with Josh Charles' character. Josh Charles is coming off at Dead Poet Society, and he plays Brian. So she's not into that job. And so she quits it and then basically forges a resume so she could get a job at a local fashion business that only makes like school student uniforms and things like that. And Joanna Cassidy, who's amazing in this film, playing Rose, takes a liking to her right away. So rather than giving her a receptionist job, she gives her a job as her executive assistant, which pisses off the bitchy secretary played by Jane Brooke, who now wants to find out, you know, how did she get this job? Who is this girl? And Sue Ellen essentially is like getting paid a lot of money, and she starts to do pretty well. But again, reality starts to set in where, you know, these people might think if they find out who she is, she's going to get in trouble. The kids take her petty cash and they start spending it on things like a TV, and they spend it on a diamond ring or whatever else. And each character starts to mature as the summer goes on. And then we get to like the big climax where she has to throw this big party for a presentation as the company looks like it's about to go under. And she comes up with this great idea for their show, which could save the company. And everything kind of comes to a head because Josh Charles doesn't know what she does. And then Josh Charles' sister is the receptionist. And she's getting like, the runaround and whatnot. So you have all these complications that occur and makes for some hijinks and high drama and everything else. And that's that. So the writers of this movie developed the original story in the early 80s from the success of Risky Business. They were inspired by the idea of a teenager taking over their home and having to take charge. And what would happen if that happened where the parents weren't around, there was no supervision, what would they do? So they said, well, let's do this with a girl with multiple siblings. And originally, it was called The Real World before it became the reality show on MTV. Mm-hmm. They wrote this movie intended for Winona Ryder, and then when Fox bought the script, they thought it would be a good idea for Justine Bateman because they were trying to push her career off of Family Ties, thinking, Michael Giovanni movie star, let's make the sister movie star now. But that wasn't working out. And I don't know how true it is that the original story was really supposed to revolve more around like a whodunit of who killed the babysitter, and everybody had their motives. And that was too dark, so they kind of like suppressed that. But the motives were still intact with, every character having their issues with the babysitter and stuff that they would do, like the way they would get dressed up, or, the girlfriend of the middle brother can't be around anymore, little things like that. Eventually, the company Outlaw Productions, which had done Sex, Lies, and Videotape, took on the project. One of the executives was friends with Ed O'Neill of Married with Children, Al Bundy, and suggested Christina Applegate for the role, and she was interested in it. But they still weren't so sure. The writers weren't so sure about it at first. They were kind of concerned with casting her. They were concerned the hire of Stephen Herrick, who's coming off of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. But ultimately, everything came around, and then they casted everybody else. Keith Coogan actually went for, I think, either the younger brother or for the Josh Charles part. They thought he was too old to play Kenny, but once they kind of made Kenny kind of a goth kid, then it made more sense. Like, he got himself a wig and dressed himself to look like a rocker. They wanted Jennifer Love Hewitt to play the younger daughter.
Yes. Yeah.
She was doing Kids Incorporated, so they got the lovely Danielle Harris, who I wish could come on this show, but she has her own show. But please come on if you ever watch this. She ends up playing the younger sister, and still one of her favorite movies because one of the few that she still watches today. And Joanna Cassidy was also recommended by the studio for the Rose part, and again, brilliant. One of David Duchovny's first movies before the X-Files, and he plays the boyfriend of Jane Brooks' role. And there's so much more trivia we could get into, but I'll let Jeff kick off because I know I talk and ramble a lot.
Well, I did see this in theaters. This might have been one of the first movies I saw in theaters alone. Like you said, I was a big Christina Applegate fan, Kelly Bundy. And, it was different seeing her not play, sexual in a role. And, that really, she had to really play, like, more of the comedy and even the more dramatics of the scenes, And I was, like, so pleasantly surprised by this movie. And, at the time you think, okay, there's, like, a teenage comedy. But as you get older and look back at it, you're like, wow, this was actually like really strong like writing or ideas involved in this film because yes, while I like Jennifer Love Hewitt and would have loved her in the role, seeing Danielle Harris at the time in this movie, I was like, yes. Keith Coogan, come on, I've seen like all the teenage movies he's been
Toy
in.
Soldiers,
exactly. I was like, and he's in this. I'm mother freaking in Book of Love.
Adventures of Babysitting,
Under the Boardwalk, So I was like, oh, he's in it. I'm in playing a different role, like more rebellious this time. The stoner, brother, heavy metal brother. I was sold on this. I even remember when it came out on video, the contest with the standee with the legs open, and you were supposed to answer trivia, and you could win a chance to win the car from the movie. Because, one of the reasons why they have to go look for or get money is because they accidentally bury the old lady with the money the mother left for the summer. I just I don't know. Even when I saw it in theaters, I liked it. And then when it came on cable, I was just happy that other people discovered it, as it went along. I mean, you have kind of a Twin Peaks reunion here, David Duchovny and Kimmy Robertson, playing one of Sue Ellen's, I guess, work friends who really does all the paperwork for her. Let's face it, Joanna Cassidy and Keith Coogan walk away with the film. Yeah. It also shows Christina Applegate can handle a lead role on her own. So that's another thing I appreciate about this film. I mean, you also had the problem towards the end of production when Christopher Petit, he had an increasing drug use problem. So that, a lot of his scenes had to be cut.
Yeah, he had a larger thing with the girl that he was dating, and he gets a diamond ring for it. If you notice, all the other siblings have some significant part in it, but his part is so downplayed you almost forget he's there.
Exactly. It's like he just shows up, and it's just like, oh yeah, they do have another sibling. And Edward Furlong was actually up for the role of Kenny.
Yeah.
But he was working on Terminator 2. Griffin Dunn was up for Gus, Rose's boyfriend,
played by John Getz.
Yep. And this is what I found kind of shocking, but also not shocking, that John Landis was actually the first choice of the director, but he didn't like the story.
It definitely felt more like a John Hughes movie. And it's funny because when this was coming out, I think they were promoting it as, it's Home Alone, but with 5 kids instead of 1. So it's almost like the end of an era right there.
Well, they offered it to him, but again, he was like, I only direct my own scripts, and I'm trying to get away from teen movies at this point. And then they offered it to Joe Dante, Richard Donner, Amy Heckerling, who, kind of wish she would have taken
She could have done it.
Yep. Chris Columbus.
He did that.
John Badham, your boy. And Joel Schumacher actually turned it down. It would have been a lot more stylish if he had made it, I can tell you that. But
plenty of day glow.
But I have to give Stephen Herrick, he doesn't get enough credit as a director because he had a time period where everything was a banger. And this was one of the start. He had already did Bill and Ted, then he did this movie, eventually did Mr. Holland's Opus, and even
The Mighty Ducks.
Yes, and even though we make fun of Rockstar, he did a decent job of directing that. So, everybody brought, it's one of those projects where you didn't expect much out of, but it's got more longevity than anybody really expected it to get, and it's still something, you could still, if you have kids or are a parent, you could show it to them today and not have any problems. It's just one of those movies that you can always put on and just rewatch in the background. It's like a good comfort movie. This is something you can always put on, and I don't know anybody who doesn't dislike this. And it's something you can still show your kids and not have to worry. And it's, a little dark, they get carjacked by drag queens. Where the hell did that come from in 1991?
Liza?
You have all the stoners shooting dishes on the roof. You couldn't do that now with gun control. I'm just this is just I don't know, just such a great comfort film that you just assume everybody's seen it. If somebody told you, I've never seen that, you'd be shocked. You know
what I think it is that makes it so appealing is that, okay, it starts out with the whole deal with the babysitter, and at first, if you've never seen the movie, you think that's the whole plot is what are they going to do with this babysitter, and then as soon as she croaks, it takes a complete 180 where, once Christina Applegate gets the job with the fashion company, then you have multiple subplots. You have the plot where she's trying not to get caught with the fact that she's underage and working for this company and trying to find ways to do her job halfway, like getting the girl from Twin Peaks to do the QED report. Mm-hmm. Then you have the John Getz character trying to hit on her, even though he's with Joanna Cassidy. And then you have the scheme with Jane Brooke and David Duchovny trying to find out who she is. And on top of that, Josh Charles being the sibling to Jane Brooke and not knowing that she's working for the company as well. Although one issue with that plot that I will say is that when he goes to the company and he's sitting down with Jane Brooke and he's like, pouring his heart about, oh, Sue Ellen won't tell me what she does for a living. And then right in front of Sue Ellen behind the couch, her name gets dropped by Jane Brooke's character. Wouldn't you think she would have been caught by then? Like she just flat out loud, because that's not like a common name you just throw around. That's like a little oversight on the part of Stephen Herrick, I think.
That's true, but again, you gotta hold your disbelief when it comes to that.
But I just say, like, it's one of those things where all those subplots can get very messy very quickly in a movie like that. But somehow the writers managed to get all those threads to connect. All through, I think, the strength of Christina Applegate's performance and the situation that she's put into. Even Keith Coogan's character has an arc that works.
Yes. And the thing that is unfortunate with this movie is ever since this movie, anytime I've seen Jane Brooke in anything, I instantly dislike her character. It's just like, oh, this bitch!
But you know what? She's oddly attractive, though.
In a 1980s way. See, I look at her and I think of Marcy Darcy. It's like, okay, in a bitchy way, sure. But, she is a good actress, obviously, because, after all these years, I still associate her with that type of character. But even when she's played sympathetic roles, I still be like, I don't care. I don't feel sorry for her.
Oh, like in Kindergarten Cop.
Yeah, it's like, you deserved it! You sold out but that's how much, like, an impression this movie and its characters have left me. And to think this movie bombed when it came out, if it was not for and home video, this movie never would have, like, gotten the cult following that it kind of enjoys. And considering, unfortunately, because she has a debilitating disease, Christina almost called her Christina Aguilera. Christina Applegate won't be performing on camera too much more. She'll probably be doing a lot of voiceover roles. This I would definitely put on her highlight reel, because next to this performance and physically her performance in the National Lampoon's Vacation, that's some of her best work.
Yeah. The more balanced, yeah.
Yeah, she's one of those actresses who you don't really think about, but then when you see her actually in a role, it reminds you, damn, she is good, Like, she can do what it takes. But unfortunately, I feel like also she's pigeonholed by Kelly Bundy and more the sex pot aspect of that role than the comedic timing of that role.
Yeah, because after this movie, she played that part for another, 6-7 years? I mean, I don't mind it. I love Married with Children overall, but that's a long time.
Exactly. And you start wondering, like, during that time, were there better offers, for her, but kind of wither away, even though this bombed, I'm sure somebody was like, she can actually be a lead. They might not.
She was doing a lot of, like, those straight-to-cable movies, like Across the Moon, and there was that other one that was with the virtual reality. She was doing some weird stuff in between.
Well, she also did those NBC, where they put all the teenage stars in one.
Yeah, Dance Till Dawn.
Yes, stuff like that. And I remember she did that her first movie role where she played a prostitute who gets, like, raped. I don't know if it's called Streets or something, but I remember that was, like, her first big role. And it was one of those where, Christina Applegate from Married with Children in this. So it wasn't, like, one of those, like, proud roles. It was like, I did an indie film, and then they just exploited my name and made it seem like I'm the star of this movie.
And she guest starred on 21 Jump Street. She was like a girl in a mental institute.
I remember that episode. the closest we'll ever see Johnny Depp and Christina Applegate in the same room or in the same production. Yes, and she played a kind of nympho in that role too. It was like, well, she was getting pretty much typecast back then. But like I said, I applaud everybody involved in this movie. But Christina Applegate, Keith Coogan, Joanna Cassidy, they are like the stars of this movie. You know, the things that you remember the most. And also David Duchovny's slick back hair and earring.
Another thing too, I gotta say, well, two things. I do wish that Jane Brooke and David Duchovny had a better comeuppance at the end than just like their car being splittered with shaving cream, because I thought it was like, okay, now they're all happy because Sue Ellen got caught, but like, couldn't they do something more? Like, couldn't she get fired for being a bitch or something like that? Like, that's it.
Even though it's the 90s. I mean, she's already punished by being the receptionist, really. And
yeah, and then the other thing, so like with Keith Coogan's character, it's like his arc is that as the movie goes on, he realizes he likes being a chef, he likes culinary stuff, and then at the end, like he cuts his hair, and now he's all like refined and wants to go back to school. Even though his friends kind of like they're interchangeable, just a bunch of rocker dudes, I do like at the end when he's like, I think I'm going to go back to school. Like they're kind of cool about that. You don't ever see it because normally the friends would just abandon him. Like, oh no, now you're just a fucking pussy. No, they're like, no, that's actually pretty cool. Go ahead, do it.
Well, that shows true friends, you know.
Yeah, I like that.
And even the girl he had a crush on, who was Sue Ellen's friend, now is kind of looking at him like, hey,
you got some big dick energy.
Exactly. Oh my God, you're about something?
Yeah.
You might just get her, you know? So I'm just like, it's one of those movies where somebody didn't like it. Why would you hate this movie? You know,
there's no reason to hate it at all. I mean, there's some people probably it's just lowbrow, throwaway Saturday afternoon comedy, but no, it's actually pretty smart in the way that it's written and structured. Any other director could screw this up. Thankfully, they were supposed to do a remake, and it doesn't seem like that's ever going to happen. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know how you follow up on this. And I think they even talked about a sequel at one point because it was so popular on video. But then again, what do? You bring another babysitter who cracks?
Well, I just figured maybe the continuing adventures, because it's going to be a weird Thanksgiving when Sue Ellen comes over Brian's house, has to deal with the sister, Or maybe she's trying, or that the sequel, they could do their original thing, a whodunit, because Jane Brooks gets killed. And everybody has a different reason for wanting her dead.
That'd be funny, yeah.
See? This stuff, right? Where was it? I needed to be in Hollywood in the 90s. Bring me in. I would have been like in that Key Peele sketch where they were trying to make Gremlins too. I would have been just coming up with shit. But yeah, obviously, we both love this movie and highly recommend it. And if you haven't seen it, how have you avoided it this long? Unless, you're one of these 18-year-olds who considers this like, an old movie, Yeah,
you got the voice of Homer Simpson for the animated title sequence.
I'm like, there's just so many pleasures of this. Like, I want to go watch it again after this now, just talking about it, because it's been a little minute since I've last seen this. So I'm like, this is definitely, I'm going to say it might make it into the pop cinema classics. And definitely teen movie.
Definitely.
So, any other things you'd like to say about Don't Tell Mom, The Babysitter's Dead?
Well, I know they had issues with the title because they shot it as the real world when they made the movie, and then when they found out that the reality show was happening, they had to remove it. So when they changed it to Don't Tell Mom, Babysitter's, everybody freaked out. They thought it would be a disaster, but once Johnny Carson made a joke about it around the time it was released, they're like, oh, maybe it's not so bad. And you know what? Given the way it was marketed and everything else, it actually paid off because that poster is actually pretty iconic for the people who remember that film.
Oh, yes. And I just find it interesting, like Conchetta Tobe, who plays the mother, her character doesn't have a name. It's just Mom. Unfortunately, pretty soon after the release, the woman who played the babysitter actually did die in real life. She was
as did the little brother. Well, not the little brother, but Christopher Patet, unfortunately.
Oh, he made it to 18 at least, you know.
So he dated Danielle Harris for a short time.
Yep, because she had a crush on him.
Then that would be weird.
Yeah. No, but during the time, Danielle Harris had a crush on him, but he had a crush on Christina Applegate.
Yeah.
So it was like, oh, the love triangles of this movie behind the scenes. And some of you might actually remember he's in a scene in Point Break.
Yep.
Telling Keanu Reeves how he likes seeing old guys learn to surf. And I think he was in an episode of Sequest DSV. You know, if anybody wants to go try and find that. I know he was in that movie with Nick Mancuso and Richard Grieco. And
oh, yes. It was on Fox.
Yeah, the one where, for some odd reason, Richard Grieco thinks he's an Old West, like, quick draw artist.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, yeah, it's a really strange movie. But I think that might have been his last role in a film of Christopher Patet. But, again, he's remembered through this film, and this film brings happy memories to anybody who watches. So that ends our business for this week. But as you know, we always have future business, especially when we're down in the deep dive. So until next time, we say, see some good movies, and please comment, and please subscribe.
Yes, subscribe.
Yes, you want us to keep bringing you this good content, or content in general. We need some more subscribers. Inspire us. Come on.
Yeah, subscribe, bitches.